The world's getting far more south right now, and people are ingesting hundreds of thousands of layers of emotion, way too much for human beings. So in that way, what happens? Your vibration drops. Now, these beings, these entities, attachments, whatever you want to call them, they're actually in the same space but different times. So they're walking around, and if your vibrations in symbiote with their low vibration, they could actually attach to you. And so when they attach you, they just ride around with you, and they manipulate. They send you thoughts, and they'll just stay with you until you remove them. Now, it's just becoming self-aware. I think that if you do feel those symptoms, then like your abdomen's bloaty and you've got tight neck or shoulders, and you get negative thoughts, the chances are you've got the attachment.
Right now on Higher Journeys with Alexis Brooks. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Higher Journeys. I am your host, Alexis Brooks. And of course, if it's your first time here, I welcome you. I welcome you, and I welcome my second time guest. It's been a while, Christopher Macklin. Christopher Macklin, everyone, say hello. Christopher is here.
Yay! Thanks for having me.
So glad to have you back. It's been, I think it was September of 2021 that we last had Christopher on. And we had a very, very intense conversation, not unlike what we're going to get into today, guys. We talked about entity attachment, Christopher, if you recall. And you had some very strong things to say about how prevalent entity attachment is. We've covered this before on the show, for sure, with several of our guests. And it's something that, although it is deep, it can seem a bit dark. I think it's something that we all need to be aware of. You said that you believe that about 98% of the population has some semblance of attachment. Let's just have me make a couple of comments on that, and then we're going to transition to alien abduction. It's all connected. Let's go into that. 98% of the population, you feel, Christopher, may have some form of attachment. Where are you getting that from, if you don't mind me asking?
I talked to Melchizedek beings. Yeah, it's late 90s, and I think the things about it is this, the world's getting far more south right now, and people are ingesting hundreds of thousands of layers of emotion, way too much for human beings. So in that way, what happens? Your vibration drops. Now, these beings, these entities, attachments, whatever you want to call them, they're actually in the same space but different times. So they're walking around, and if your vibrations in symbiote with their low vibration, they could actually attach to you. And so when they attach you, they just ride around with you, and they manipulate. They send you thoughts. They can affect the body. Like, for example, it can, from a spiritual perspective, they can paralyze the lower intestine, affect the liver, adrenals. So that's why people get exhausted. And again, from a spiritual perspective, they can tap in the lower back. The L4, L5 disc will start bulging after a while, so you get lower back issues. And they hang on the shoulders and neck. So your shoulders and neck are always tight. Wow, and they'll just stay with you until you remove them. Now, it's just becoming self-aware. I think that if you do feel those symptoms, then, like your abdomen's bloaty and you've got tight neck or shoulders, and you get negative thoughts, the chances are you've got the attachment. And it's important to remove them. There's different types. There's Anunnaki, there's Draconians, there's Luciferians, there's Archons, there's first and second dimensional scarab beetle type things, snake bean type things. So there's a few of them to attach. And of course, with the low vibration, that allows, if you've got pathogens in the body, again, from a spiritual perspective, can mutate the cells, turn into tumors. So important to remove them.
You've been very, very diligent in saying that this is the origin of where this may be coming from, but it seems like it would be a vicious circle. You talk about pathogens, you talk about things in the environment, lifestyle that has been foisted on so many of us through the medias, versus, or in addition to these attachments, because both apparently exist. And you're very strong on the fact that these are non-human intelligences that have essentially infiltrated our species. And are they the origin of it, or are they feeding on some of the other things that are in the environment that we're partaking in? Do you know what I mean? I really want to try to delineate that, because there are other things that cause maladies in our intestines and gut and the foods that we're eating, as an example. So
Yeah, or emotion, you know. I think,
emotion.
I mean, their biggest purpose is they want to reduce the population. And the reason why is because these beings are under the planet and they breathe low levels of oxygen. So, and they want to come up on the planet eventually. And so, if they reduce the population, how do you do that? Well, they also want to reduce the oxygen. And that's why, you know, they spray a lot of engineering into the sky to basically block out the sun, so it'll start to reduce the oxygen level so they can actually come up and breathe on top. At the moment, they can't. So there's a lot of agendas at flow here. It's very interesting.
There are many in our audience are obviously well versed in this part of the fringe part of reality, and yet there are going to be some people that are thinking this is crazy talk. I don't. I think reality has always been far more vast than we give credit to, but this is extreme. The idea that there may be some alien human hybrids sort of acting as a proxy in some cases for these beings that are fully non-human. What are your thoughts on that, and how common is that? Because some of these agendas, you know, there are conversations that they're people doing them, but are these people not fully people? Not the first time this has been talked about, of course. But your thoughts?
No, I mean they're hybrid, reptilian hybrid people. So they look human, but they're really not. And the things about the reptilians is if they're malevolent, they really have no empathy. They're just interested in control. And so, you know, if they infiltrate the government, which they have done, of course, then you get, you know, a species in charge of the human race and with no empathy or anything. It's kind of worrisome, to say the least. All they want to do is just follow the orders and work on the agendas at play at the moment, of which there were many, you know.
I want to transition and spend the bulk of our time talking about, because you've got an excellent discourse on the abduction syndrome. Some people say the abduction phenomenon. Of course, those that watch Higher Journeys know that this is something we readily discuss. But in drawing a nexus, Christopher, between the attachment phenomenon, of which you believe is prevalent, and the abduction phenomenon, you're saying that maybe 98%, the majority of the population, have some form of attachment or infiltration from these either non-human or partially non-human beings. How prevalent then would the abduction phenomenon be? Equally so?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the reptilians and the, you know, Anunnaki, Draconians, everything else, they've been around for a long time. And the thing is, people often ask me, well, why can't you get God to remove them from the planet? And the answer is because they've been here a long time and they're actually part of the classroom. They're part of what we need to learn to remove these things and keep them out. So, you know, that's the difference between violation and education. So to me, it's an education because before you came down here, you knew they were here and you have to learn how to manage them. And the biggest thing really is to get your vibration up, release a lot of emotion, get your vibration to a point where you feel like a warrior, where nothing will phase you. And once you're there, they can't come near your energy field. So that's, you know, a solution to that. In the meantime, you have to say maps of intent to keep them out, like prayers, to keep them out. And we've got, if anyone wants any help, on the website is the 27 esoteric Merkabah field prayer. If you say that 3 times a day, it will keep these beings out.
That's
now,
great.
Abduction is different. So, you know, of course, with Hitler, the Greys did the reticular. They basically produced a agreement where if they handed over technology, they would, you know, they had the ability to abduct the people. And of course, does your government have the, you know, have the authority really to sign a contract saying they can steal your body parts? The answer is probably not. But of course, people don't know about it. So once they'd signed an agreement, then they were abducting people. And the reason for that is they've destroyed their planet. You know, they've had nuclear war. They've got to a stage where they can't reproduce. And so they had to look for a way of keeping their, you know, greys, you know, alive. And so what they're doing is they're taking eggs and sperm from female males. And what they're doing is reproducing that way. So they're producing like humanoid grey beings, which and they've been doing it a lot. I mean, I've dealt with so many people who have been abducted, and it's crazy. The ships paralyze you, they take you on board, they steal the egg sperm, or they can actually implant the child into the human. So they'll put some sperm of maybe the grey into the human. They normally run that for about 2 months until the baby starts forming. Then they'll abduct again, take it out. So, and some people have felt pregnant and suddenly, oh, I'm not pregnant anymore. What's going on? And what's going on is that you're being used as a manufacturing process. It's totally wrong.
As many moving parts as there is to this drama, if we were to boil it down to one thing, and you have said this is a massive experiment to see if a hybridized race can be created, perhaps in order to save theirs, if we're referring to the Greys. We, of course, have heard many. I personally have taken many accounts of individuals who believe that they have had both missing pregnancies, implanted pregnancies. I've interviewed numerous individuals, specifically females, who have felt this to be the case. Again, I want us to speak, Christopher, today. This is a very important conversation, guys. And again, many of you listening are familiar with this kind of a discourse. There's some of you here that may have never heard it. Let's speak to those who would otherwise say, you are raving mad, both of you. How would you make a case that this is real? Can we? How would we make a case? How do we open more eyes, Christopher, to the fact that this is happening to the otherwise oblivious person that may, in fact, be being taken anyway, unconscious of it? How would we make the case?
Well, I've dealt with a lot of people. I mean, first of all, I'd just like to say that if people say, you're absolutely crazy, barking, loony mad, I would be honored for that, because I am. We all are. And it actually depends on your perspective. My perspective is we're all normal. Out there is crazy barking mad, but that's okay. But I think, how do you make a case where you can prove it? Very difficult. But I've worked with so many people who felt they've been raped, who felt, and we went back to the subconscious and started looking at when it happened. They saw a loss of time. There's so much evidence to show that it happened. Can you physically prove it? I can see these beings. I have the ability to see them when they come through. Also, craft in the sky. There's a lot of craft in the sky that people don't see. So it's difficult, but I did chair the meeting with the Galactic Federation, of which I'm one of 3 Melchizedek beings who chair it. And this was about, I've got a loss of time really because of the pandemic, but I think it was in 2017. I think it was June 2017, and we had a meeting. Okay, violation versus education, and it was decided by all the main parties that it's a violation of the human race. And so, for the first time, they interfered, and what they did is they got the Arcturians to sweep the Greys off the planet. So great. So we're okay for a bit, and they were banned from coming back to this time space here. So how did they get over that? Well, they're pretty cheeky, these things. So what they did is now they're opening portals where they're in a portal, but they can still manipulate you. So they're in a different time space. So they can put a portal in your house. A Grey can come in your house, but not in this time space, stay in the portal and manipulate you that way. So it didn't really it did something for a while, but now they're, people manipulate and get over the ban, I guess, right. Which is sad.
Well, if you were to juxtapose, thank you for that. I know it's difficult because we're not talking about proving something in a 3D manner of speaking. This is something that is, forgive the cliche, has been alien to many for a long time and is becoming less so, I think, in recent years, not the least of which is because the mainstream has finally decided to take their foot off the gas pedal of the giggle factor just a tad. We've got yet another hearing, I understand, an open congressional hearing coming up in the coming days, where this meets with all of, the actually talking about the beings, I don't know, but something is going on, Christopher, of which there needs to be, or there's something is pushing the exposure to whatever extent of this reality. So it may not be as hard to convince people, is what I'm saying, as we might think. But it's good to have this conversation. I agree with you. I think anecdotally, you're talking to a lot of people who are having these experiences, and maybe there are a couple that are off, but most probably are not. I know I talk to a lot of people that are having difficulty integrating their abduction encounters, of which they know they're having, into day-to-day life. That's another thing that I know you work with people on trying to do. Let's talk a little bit about manner of abduction. They can happen in a number of ways. Some, can be taken out of their car, can literally be dematerialized in some cases. A whole other kind of physics applies here. Coming into the room, I've talked to quite a few people that have seen the beings literally coming through their walls and them being phased through the walls back and up onto the craft. Let's talk about that a little bit. If you're enjoying this episode, along with all of the subjects that we cover here on Higher Journeys, then I invite you to join our members-only community on Patreon, where we go even deeper into the conversations with the guests that you know and love. Not only does your membership ensure that we can keep this work going and growing, but you'll also get immediate access to our exclusive after shows. Get up close and personal with the guests of the show, along with many other member perks. So click on the link below to join now, or visit higherjourneys.com where you'll find the Patreon link. We'll see you on the journey. Thanks. What are some of the more common ways you feel these abductions are happening?
A lot of it's kind of tractor beam technology, like you say. They put a beam, and they can just suck you out of bed, or like you say, sometimes the beings will come through the beam and help you, help you move forward. But obviously, they paralyze you first, which is not okay. I have seen people where they've been in a car, and this is an interesting story. So driving up somewhere, and suddenly the whole time stopped. And suddenly they were at their destination, and one of the lady who had this problem, well, actually no, that's a different time. But anyway, the lady got abducted, and they took some body parts, but they lost time. Now, another person was interested when she was young, basically lost 9 hours. So she went to school, walking home from school, lost 9 hours, and suddenly ends up on the doorstep with a right over removed. Okay. And there was blood there, and no one could figure it out. So, there's a lot of different things happening. But definitely tractor beam technology. They do take them on the ship, or they can probably suspend, the car, take the person out, work on them, put them back, and then place the car in the destination, So I've seen some extraordinary things happen.
I was just going to say, what would be one of the most bizarre encounters you've taken in terms of what you've heard? Can you recall one? That one was pretty bizarre, by the way. That's horrible.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that was an over remove. That's probably the worst abduction I've seen, because mostly they tied themselves up, but there was blood over this lady, and they clearly done an operation, and maybe for whatever reason hadn't completed it properly, so they left blood around and things. And of course, the police were called. What's happened? Who did this? The people upstairs. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to it's hard to understand.
Right. It is very difficult. Yeah. And then you marry this with the enormous amount of animal mutilations that have gone on all over this planet, not the least of which are the cattle mutilations. And going back to this idea of massive experimentation, not just with human alien, but human animal. This confounds, of course, the mainstream that have covered these local cases, particularly these farmers that or cattle ranchers that have reported cattle being mutilated, and nothing is left other than the skeleton, or pieces are meticulously extracted. Have you talked to any abductees that have any more insight into what is going on, perhaps on board the craft with these animals? Because let's assume that they're also part of this grander experiment, that have seen some of these animal specimens on board.
Absolutely. I mean, I went to a ranch. It was in Phoenix, and it was having exactly that problem. It was a ranch for retired horses. So it wasn't a I don't think he registered as a non-for-profit, but he got donations in to look after these horses, and And what would happen? He'd wake up one morning, like you say, completely dismembered horse in bits, virtually all of it gone. But I know the greys eat the meat, so that's one thing. But they also do experiments on these animals as well to obviously, try and get these animals so they can actually get a form of meat in the future. So they do take certain parts of them onto the craft and probably use their DNA and everything else, But they do eat them, they actually eat them.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what was interesting, I went to this ranch and they had a particular place where a portal opened, and I spent 2 days getting the code, opening the portal, and suddenly, bang, there was a sonic boom, and the thing opened, but it didn't open on the ground where it normally does. It opened 300 feet up. And I was watching this thing. It was interesting. And, we have watches. As Melchizedek beings, we have watches, which are the Arcturians. So the Arcturian craft, bang, suddenly appear, and they're in the sky about a mile away, floating like 3 to 1. They just sat there for 40 minutes. And I was watching this portal. There was just things just dropping out, like craft and everything else. So I shut it down, finally, managed to shut it down and keep it shut, and all this stuff stopped at the ranch, which was good. But there's a lot of ranches, in these areas, Nevada, Arizona, where, there's a lot of activity, a lot of craft activity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, of course, we're getting a lot of attention on, more attention, I should say, on the Skinwalker Ranch that continues to present as one of the most enigmatic, I think, in all of this. There's so many moving parts. Again, forgive the cliche, literally moving parts with this dynamic. All for we say experimentation, but it's probably more than experimentation, but rather a creation of a new species, maybe to save their own. Particularly, if we're talking about the Greys.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. This is quite a phenomenon. Are you seeing more people coming to you in the last several years, particularly based on all of the mental stresses that have gone on in recent years, that have also been talking to you about abductions? Is there a connection there, do you think?
Yeah, and entity attachments. I think what's happening is that people, first of all, people start thinking a little bit outside the box. Oh, this is not what it seemed. Then they start investigating. Then they start to wake up properly, and then you get this like massive jolt. Like, wow, there's got to be something that's not hijacked,
Mm-hmm.
And people often say to me, "There's got to be something hijacked." Now, hang on, let's have a think. Oh, everything's hijacked. There's nothing that's not hijacked. Your water, your food, your government, your religion, all religions, most of the religions have a hijacking element in them. And, Masonic Lodge, everything else, all these things are there to manipulate. And so, it's a big thing to digest. And I think people go through a grief process of, wow, I didn't realize the world was this bad. I said, just wait till you find some more out. You'll realize it's even worse than you really think. But when you get a grip of it, you can get in a place where you can actually detach from this matrix. And I think you have to, because if you don't, it's going to suck you under. You're going to get depressed and suicidal. So what you have to do is take a step back and say, well, yeah, the government's messed up, everything's messed up, but you know what? It's not going to bother me, because my bubble around me, I'm going to make great food. I'm going to buy it from the Amish. I'm going to put some music on, dance like a mad person, have a glass of wine, have friends who don't suck the life out of, non-passive aggressive. So you can just enjoy your life, because there's a lot more needy people now. There's a lot more stress because people just don't know what to do. They kind of feel powerless.
Yeah.
And to me, the power is in God. You're not powerless. You're an amazing being.
Absolutely.
And I'm trying to encourage people to be able to release that emotion, take your power back. Yeah, we're doing it. I mean, once every 120 days, we do a big ceremony. And it's basically calling out all the big tech, big pharma, big this, big that, governmental systems, religions, Masonic stuff, Illuminati, Cabal. And it takes about probably 2 hours. We chant it together. And it's basically the fundamental principle is all these people, named and not named, known or unknown, who have committed crimes against humanity, we're going to bring them before God for justice in only the way God knows how, not for us to judge them. So we're going to release them to God with unconditional love and forgiveness. And that's a powerful thing, especially if you get like 500, 600, 1,000 One time we had 4,000 people on, and it is a powerful exercise. It's helping break down the satanic nature that's driving all this, and I think it's really helping.
That's huge. We're obviously going to have a link to your website. In fact, I'm going to mention it right now. It's globalenlightenmentproject.com. Christopher and his team do some amazing meditations. You've been doing this for a long time, and I can totally see how more people would be signing on now more than ever. I'm glad we're taking it. You're kind of driving this conversation in that direction, because this is a dark conversation. But you've heard me said it before, journeyers. You cannot know how brilliant the light can be unless and until you glimpse the shadow. We're glimpsing the shadow today. But we want to now, we're glimpsing the shadow, but the shadow is here. You can stick your head in the sand if you want, but it doesn't mean it's not going to be there. However, when you shine a light on it, the light always wins. Let's now talk about, because this is what you do. This is what you do well. We're here for solutions, not just to highlight the problems. I'm not not into fear porn, not in the least. I'm into truth, like so many, and illuminating what's happening so we can heal it. Now we're obviously going to send as many people to your website as possible and to participate in a meditation like this and others. But what are some of the things that people can start? Let's say somebody feels that they have been abducted, may not be sure, but have a sense that something funky is going on. What might people do on their own to get started, to first identify and then begin the healing process, if that's possible?
Well, I think identification is really important. It's like you said, I mean, we're talking about dark stuff, but I always talk about, things and have solutions. It's really important to me to have solutions. I think, people for themselves, I think what they need to do is probably go into meditation. And if you can get deep enough to the subconscious, you can probably see what happened. And I think it's good to see what happened. Okay, so then you've got to introduce an aspect of forgiveness, because it happened, and and do your spiritual practice as well. Release some emotion, do some deep breathing, do some Pilates, do some yoga, whatever gives you joy, because that's going to raise your spirits.
Absolutely.
I think we have meditations for releasing emotion. You can run one of those. If you really do feel bad, and sometimes I've had people express that they actually feel as though they've been raped. And if that's the case, it's probably worth doing a little bit of healing to allow the Melchizedek beings to get inside the womb and actually comb the meridians and repair some of the scar tissue that's happened, So that's another thing you can do. And
Sure. And I like using this term of righteous indignation. Do it with purpose. And we're not just asking, we're commanding in the most beautiful way. You're not invited here. You're just not. And it's hard. It can be hard because we're dealing with something that cannot be 100% identified. And yet there's got to be a measure, I think, of trust that there is something happening, so you can start to get some insight and heal from it ultimately. I want to touch on, before we go more into the healing side of this, the intergenerational connection. I have taken, again, many accounts of individuals who have learned at some point in their trajectory of learning about their own contact encounters that they in fact are a part of a legacy in family, sometimes in both paternal and maternal sides, mother, grandmother, aunt, uncle, sister, siblings. How common, from your research into this abduction phenomenon, is that?
Oh, it's very common. But I think the reason why they do that is they're looking for particular starseed families, and the bloodlines of them. And I've noticed with me, I mean, with my wife as well, her mother was abducted. Mandy's never been touched because it's the Melchizedek element. They leave them alone. But her mother's been abducted many times. So was her mother's sister, and it goes back and back and back. So it's very common, actually. And, the people I speak to say, oh, yeah, my mother was abducted as well, or my father, or, they were talking about it. But, of course, people don't like talking about abductions because it sounds crazy, but it's not, So, yeah, it's pretty common. It's pretty common. They look for, and don't forget, if you've got, an alien blood type like O negative, I mean, I'm O negative, I don't know what you are, A negative, things like that, they're interested in those bloodlines because, you're a reptilian. Sorry, you're a starseed. Like a benevolent being hybrid, basically.
Right.
Like I am. I've got 84% Melchizedek DNA, so my body's a bit different. Heart's very big. I got it scanned once. Like, oh my god, you've got end-stage heart failure. Nah, don't worry about it. So, you have to be very careful because they're not used to seeing beings, if they're starseeds, when they've been spliced at birth. So
Right.
yeah, they do look for the people who are spliced at birth. Actorians, Melchizedek. Palladians aren't necessarily spliced at birth. They have enough DNA in the human body to be able to put the soul in. But one of the biggest things is you have to have enough DNA, and the light body's got to be compatible with that starseed soul from that, from those beings. So interesting.
Would there be a particular profile type, blood type that they would not be interested in?
They don't tend to abduct the average human being in the street who's maybe not a starseed. I mean, there's 400,000 starseeds on this planet, and there's 8 billion people, so there's a reasonable percentage. But they tend to more go after the starseed people, which I've seen. I've not seen them go after the average human being in the street. And like I say, it's interesting. I think it's because of the blood type, the bloodlines, and they're getting a very powerful being. Merge it with their DNA, and they're going to get a more powerful being. Maybe I don't know. That's what I've seen.
Right. Well, we're talking about something when we use that word abduction. I try to be very careful. I was just at Alien Con. I was letting you know, Christopher, back in March, where I was part of a talk where we were delineating, where all abduction is a form of contact. Not all contact is necessarily abduction. There are many individuals who talk about lifelong encounters, but wouldn't consider them abductions. The inference here is taken against your will and having something done to you that is not pleasant, that is for malevolent purposes. But there are these other types of encounters. And this is where it could very well be that makes up the rest of the population. I don't know. I have a theory that we may be looking at a majority of the population that has had some form of contact. I will be speaking at that about that as well coming up. Maybe we'll bring that up later. But absent of abduction, let's just talk about contact and some of the benevolent beings that are also here, of which you say you have had encounters with yourself.
Absolutely, I've encountered with the Actorians, obviously the Melchizedek beings, and I've seen ships, been on ships. It's but they're benevolent, and of course they're we're doing work with them to try and help the human race. That's our job down here. People often say, well, why do you need so many starseeds down here? Well, first of all, a lot of them are hijacked. Secondly, because Prime Creator has created this third dimensional can't interfere down here. It's a classroom. Even Prime Creator can't interfere. So, okay, so what do you do if it's going south? Well, you basically bear a load of starseeds down here who can, develop very quickly. And of course, there's different levels of them. And then from that, then you can pull from the ethers help down here if you understand how to do it. Like you say, the commanding thing is key to me. Like, let's get it done, and let's get it done right now. We thank you, God, send you your unconditional love, so be it. All because that prayers are based on that, because there's no other way to do it.
Right. Well, this is it seems like a battle that a lot of people are calling what we're going through right now spiritual warfare. I do believe there is some sort of to say the least, a tug of war going on, but keeping the Prime Creator in the place that should be, and reminding ourselves that we are of that, to me, is probably one of the first steps in the healing process. So many people, Christopher, are suffering. I'm hearing from so many people who are suffering, in some cases, more from the ridicule of the prospect of talking about their abduction than the abduction themselves. That's itself. That's the other thing that's really just so disturbing to me, the level of apathy from so many people. that are, in some cases, bullying people that are having abductions on top of their experiences being harrowing. How do you deal with that when you get somebody like that? They're suffering from the abduction itself, and they're suffering from the prospect of discussing it publicly or even with family.
I think you have to set boundaries. I mean, I think, people often say to me, oh, blood's thicker than water. You should, be connected to your family. I actually don't agree, because again, if you're a starseed, you don't really have the same DNA as your family. And if they break, I'm not saying cut them off completely, but what I'm saying is set boundaries. Like, this is not okay to break me. I mean, I've had a whole lifetime of beration from my father, and it's gone on and on and on until about 2 years ago. I put a stake in the ground and said, enough's enough. I said, look, you're passive aggressive, you're narcissistic, you're an abuser, and I don't want to speak to you for a while. So I'm going to take a step back from about 6 weeks. That plummeted him, and he really thought about it, and he's been different since. He stopped berating me because, of course, from his perspective, I'm nuts. From my perspective, I'm thinking, you're supposed to be intelligent, and you're not even slightly looking outside the box to see what's going on.
Right.
Even the world today, like the economies, everything else. I mean, these people just don't see it. They just think, oh, well, the Ukraine war, that's what caused it all. Okay, whatever. So people just aren't seeing things. It's quite extraordinary.
Right. Well, I've questioned that too. And for those that are completely oblivious to what's going on, even though some of these things seem way out, they're so in your face right now. You would have to have your head in the sand not to see there's something really, really off happening here. So what has happened to those people? Were they just always destined to be that way? Or could there be some kind of, influence again from these same beings to render them inert to not see these things? In other words, is that part of the agenda as well? It's just, you talk about switching off, right? I know that you've talked about swiping memory when it comes to abduction, but what about swiping reason from the mind to not have the ability to see these things that we can see so clearly? What about that?
Well, I think there's a lot of programming, and people get sucked into, like, Mockingbird. Project Mockingbird basically is putting ridiculous things on the news. People see it, then they repeat it back to others, and it gets around, and suddenly they start to believe these crazy things. And I think my father's. We've talked about global warming, and he said, well, cows passing winds creating global warming. I said, oh, where'd you learn that? He goes, that was the BBC. I said, oh, okay. I know. I was just joking with him. I said, well, we fixed it over here. He goes, how do you fix it? Well, we give them tum-tums, settle the stomach, no farting, global warming over. It was a joke, by the way, big tech. But it is mind control. And I think, MK Ultra, all these things, I think they have altered the mind of people. You have to do it gradually. You can't do it over a quick period of time, but it's getting to a stage now where people really believe this stuff. It's amazing.
Right. It's the boiling frog syndrome. I
Absolutely.
think. Yeah. No question about it. Well, that could be a whole other show. And yet we're also seeing great numbers of individuals that are snapping out of it and of what we would loosely call programming. Yeah, it's really stunning. But we're glass half full, people, everyone. We're glass half full. It is an exciting time to be here. It's a time of realizing true empowerment and who we are. We are beings poised to transform in a way that we choose, not them. That's the important thing. Tell us more about what's going on your not just on your website, but with the work that you're doing with your healing practices. You've got them. When are the meditations taking place?
Yeah, we do. We do in our healing. I've reduced it by one. I was doing healings 3 times a week. It was by donation. If people don't have any money, please come on, because that's why we do it. We're a non-for-profit 501c3. So we used to do it on Monday, but I've stopped Monday. I'm just doing it Thursday, 5 p.m. Central Time, and Saturday, 11 a.m. Central Time. It's every week. If you want to watch the replays, go on YouTube, and you can play them to your heart's content. It's just there to help people. But we do specialized groups. If you've got some really crazy stuff going on, we have up to 20 people on. speak to them all, then we do the healing after. And then, of course, I have one-to-one sessions where, I speak to everyone, we do half an hour, and then we get the Melchizedek beings, do the healing. And then, all these healings are on for 7 days, except for the general groups, which is too many people. Mm-hmm. So, so the beings are there with you for 7 days, helping, reform scar tissue and work on tumors and things like this. So
amazing. Oh, I've heard some incredible stories about some of the healings that have taken place. Conversely, so many beautiful beings, it seems, that are occupying our space, both physically and non-physically. And I've heard some incredible stories of healing, instantaneous healing. So it's all here. It's all in the mix. It's really a matter of intention. And like you said, I think at the beginning of the conversation, getting your frequency to a level where you will be in alignment with those that can help you, that can be there to help you. Absolutely.
And also taking your power back. I think it's so important as you release emotion. Of course, the problem with starseeds, if you're empathic, you're going to take in so much emotion. Even if someone sneezes on you, oh my goodness, you ingest an emotion. And, it's not a bad thing. It's just that I think you have to learn how to manage that. I mean, I remember when I was younger, a couple of years ago, maybe. So,
right.
Okay, quite a few years ago. I remember, if someone talked behind my back, I was mortified to the point of almost vomiting because it was, I was just mortified with it. It crushed me. And now I think, I don't care whether people talk to me about it or not. And I think the day the guru is completely gone. You are your own guru. And I think as you work on yourself and as you release emotion and you get stronger, you become a warrior. Yeah, let's get out and do some things. And, you can help the world change, That's my job. I'm just a facilitator to get people back to their guru and help them. Then they can get out there and do some amazing things.
Absolutely. That's who we are. We're
gurus, our own gurus.
Absolutely. Yes. In the book that I wrote back in 2014, hard to believe, one of the sort of lines that was prevalent throughout said, stop. Oh gosh, now I'm not going to remember the phrase. Stop looking to the guru out there. Look to the guru within. You are the guru. And I'm not saying that right. Stop looking for the guru out there. Look for the guru right next to you. You are the guru, capital G, something like that. But it's true. We are alchemists in training. It is true. But I think in order for us to even have a glimpse of that and really, really be convicted by it, we've got to turn off the noise that is really vying for our attention. All of us are, somewhat a party to that. So that's great. Well, listen, guys, we're gonna wind this conversation down, but you know where we're going. We're going next door. Christopher and I are going to go next door, so to speak. We're going to go over to Patreon, and we're going to talk about the connection between the abduction phenomenon and transhumanism. That's right. We're going to go there a little bit. Haven't covered it too much on this show, but I think it's a worthwhile discussion because as we look at all of the extremes of what's happening right now on this planet, I believe that there's a common thread that runs throughout the entire, all these things that seem disconnected. They're connected in some way. We're going to brainstorm that a little bit. We're going to go back and forth a little bit over on the after show to see how we might be able to draw a nexus between transhumanism and the abduction phenomenon. So with that, Christopher Macklin, I want to say thank you for coming for this main portion of the show. Don't go anywhere because we're going to go next door. You're great. And it's always...
Thanks.
Yeah.
Bless your heart. Thanks for having me on. Bless your heart.
Always love having you. You've got a lot to share and a lot for people to look into, and it's worth looking into. So, and everyone, again, go to globalenlightenmentproject.com where you can get all the great stuff that Christopher's offering. So, all right, man, don't hang up. We're going to go next door. Come on over. Join us. Will you, Journeyers? We'd love to have you. All right. For now, signing off. We'll talk to you soon. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to watch what's next, plus more to explore. And don't forget to subscribe to Higher Journeys.